The story I'm about to share has survived the test of time and still strikes a deep pain in my heart, not only because of one man's cruelty, but because so many people saw the madness and chose to accept it as normal. When injustice becomes everyday routine, evil no longer needs to shout. It just keeps walking quietly. The Mississippi sun burned without mercy over the endless cotton fields of Harrington Plantation. It was 1859, and that land stretched for miles, a white empire built on black bodies, held together by whips, chains, and the forced silence of hundreds of trapped souls. The big house stood in the center like a monument to cruelty dressed as civilization. White columns, wide verandas, imported lace curtains. But behind that elegant front lived a man whose evil could rival hell itself. Edward Harrington was 42, with perfectly combed gray hair, spotless suits, and a reputation that opened every door in the South. Remember this: monsters rarely look like monsters. They arrive well-dressed, well-spoken, surrounded by people ready to call cruelty tradition. Heir to a fortune soaked in generations of blood, he ruled his estate with an iron fist hidden in kid gloves. His icy blue eyes never showed doubt, only the cold certainty of someone who could turn every desire into a command and every whim into reality. Widowed 6 months earlier, he played the grieving husband in public but felt nothing in private. Edward was already planning his next move. In the suffocating slave quarters surrounding the property, where thick air mixed with sweat and despair, lived Sarah, just 12 years old. Her thin body hardened by forced labor, eyes too large for her narrow face, cracked feet bleeding on hot earth, child's hands already rough from picking cotton since she could walk. Born on the plantation, daughter of Isaiah and Miriam Carter, her father was sold when she was 5, dragged away in chains on a cart while she screamed until her voice broke. Miriam died 2 years later from fever and a shattered heart. Sarah grew up an orphan, looked after by other enslaved women who tried to protect the little childhood she had left. One August afternoon, while inspecting the fields, Edward made his sickening decision. He saw Sarah staggering under a heavy cotton basket, and something twisted inside his mind. Not love. Edward was incapable of love. Not even ordinary desire. It was something darker, more rotten. The absolute belief he could take whatever he wanted, make the unthinkable seem normal, use his position to commit the unforgivable, and still be called respectable. That same night, he summoned Reverend Silas Thompson, a man in a black cassock with an even darker conscience. The pastor arrived with his prayer book and oily smile, already used to blessing the powerful sins for gold coins. In the living room, surrounded by Cuban cigars and French cognac, Edward laid out his plan. He would marry Sarah. It didn't matter she was a child. It didn't matter she was enslaved. It didn't matter it was a crime against humanity and God. Edward had money, power, and the arrogance of someone never stopped. Thompson hesitated only a second, just long enough for Edward to place a thick envelope on the table. Inside was enough cash to silence any moral objection. And here's something I always say. When faith becomes an excuse to obey the powerful, it stops being faith. It becomes business. The Bible speaks of men taking younger wives, the pastor murmured, searching for excuses where there was only abomination. And she is your property, after all. The law is on your side. Poisonous words. Corrupted theology. Religion sold in the name of profit. News spread through the plantation like fire. Overseers laughed with sick satisfaction. The enslaved wept silently, knowing protest meant death. Neighboring white families who heard pretended not to understand, muttering about different customs and Southern traditions, anything to avoid admitting they witnessed unspeakable horror. The whole society bowed to Edward's will, turning a monster into the master of ceremonies. What matters most is not one man's decision. It's the chorus of silence around him. Collective silence turns horror into routine. But what Edward didn't know, what his arrogance blinded him to, was that news travels. Stories cross rivers and mountains. And hundreds of miles away, a man branded with hot irons had heard about the daughter he thought was dead. Isaiah Carter, sold 7 years earlier to a Tennessee plantation, had survived the impossible. He escaped, joined free men and fugitives, armed himself, waited. When the wind carried Sarah's name and the horror awaiting her, he mounted his horse and rode south with the fury of 100 storms. Edward scheduled the ceremony for 1 week later, enough time to prepare a feast to hide the crime. While he chose imported wines and planned his banquet, he ignored the signs: restless horses on the horizon, distant torches in the night, tense silence among the enslaved, whispering of justice coming from afar. The devil planned his wedding, but the avenging angel was already on his way. The week before the ceremony turned Harrington Plantation into a grotesque theater, tragedy disguised as celebration. Edward demanded everything prepared with the pomp his position required, as if marrying a society lady instead of dragging a terrified child to his altar of depravity. The contradictions were obscene: French lace covering crime, fine crystal toasting barbarity, hired musicians drowning out sobs from the quarters. Sarah spent those days in confusion and terror no child should know. She didn't fully understand what was coming. Her innocence shielded her somewhat, but her body sensed danger like an animal. She trembled without cold, cried without tears, woke screaming from nightmares of white hands pulling her into darkness. Other enslaved women tried to console her with empty words. They had nothing else. What do you say to a child walking to slaughter? Mary Washington, the oldest woman in the quarters, became Sarah's unofficial guardian. 60 years old, scarred everywhere, Mary had survived horrors that would break strong men. 3 days before the ceremony, she pulled Sarah into a dark corner and spoke in a voice both rough and tender. "Girl, listen and never forget. You will survive. No matter what happens, take your mind somewhere else. Think of your mother in heaven. Think of cotton fields shining under the moon. Think of anything but what's happening to your body. They can take your body, but your mind is yours. Stay alive, Sarah. That's all that matters." Harsh words for a child, but Mary knew gentle lies wouldn't save her. The little girl hugged the old woman and wept silently, thin shoulders shaking against Mary's chest as the older woman stroked her tight curls, tears falling from her own eyes. Meanwhile, the big house buzzed with obscene preparations. Extra cooks prepared roast pork, stuffed chickens, pecan pies, bread puddings. Port wine came from New Orleans. Silverware polished till it gleamed. 12 local elite men invited. Farmers, lawyers, a judge, all willing to attend and legitimize what they knew was unspeakable. Their wives made excuses to stay home. Even Southern hypocrisy had limits when it came to witnessing certain abominations. Reverend Thompson arrived 2 days early, settled in a guest room, rehearsing altar words. Bible as shield, quoting verses out of context to justify the unjustifiable. When a kitchen slave spat in his food, he was whipped until flesh split. The man of God didn't protest. Order and propriety had to be maintained. The afternoon before, Sarah was taken to the main house for the first time. 2 overseers escorted her as if she could escape, though fear barely let her feet move. The front door opened to a world she knew only from afar: waxed floors, mahogany furniture, red velvet curtains. But beauty was a lie. The house smelled of mold and cruelty. They took her to a back room where 3 domestic slaves waited with bathtub, soap, clothes. Water was cold. No one warmed it. They undressed her quickly and shamefully, washed her child's body with hands silently begging forgiveness, combed her hair without tenderness because tenderness would make it worse. Bessie, only 15, wept openly while working. Then they dressed her in a white dress Edward had hastily made. Cheap cloth dyed white, not the Egyptian cotton his late wife wore, but decent for the charade. The dress was too big, falling off her thin shoulders, but no one adjusted it. She wasn't a bride. She was a sacrifice being prepared. When finished, they sat her in a chair and told her not to move until called. She sat alone for hours in that strange room, listening to house sounds. Male laughter from the dining room, silverware clinking, reverend reciting prayers aloud. Terror grew in her stomach like something alive, rising to choke her. But outside, something else grew. Plantation dogs howled at dusk, sharp and restless, making foremen grab rifles. Horses stirred in stables for no reason. A guard swore he saw distant torches on the northern road, but Edward told him to shut up. "Don't spoil my night with slave paranoia," he growled. "I like this detail because it's human. Before justice arrives, the body feels it. Fear changes the air. Animals notice. Silence becomes different." What Edward didn't know? Those torches weren't paranoia. They were a promise. Isaiah Carter and 120 armed men rode through the night, crossing rivers and forests, determined to arrive before the unthinkable happened. The storm was coming, and no locked door, no armed foreman, no unjust law could stop it. Sarah slept that night in the strange room, dressed in white, dreaming of the father she barely remembered. Somewhere in darkness, that same father rode faster, begging God he wouldn't be too late. The day dawned under heavy clouds, as if the sky refused to witness what was coming. Edward woke content, shaved carefully, wore his best charcoal gray suit. He checked his father's pocket watch. 3 p.m., ceremony time. Enough for leisurely lunch with guests, cigars on the terrace, then the obscene ritual turning his morbid desire into fact. In the kitchen, enslaved women prepared final dishes in heavy silence. Faces like stone, hearts screaming. Some murmured prayers for divine help, knowing God seemed deaf to cotton-field cries. Others worked mechanically, cutting, seasoning, baking, because resistance meant death, and death wouldn't save Sarah. In the back room, Sarah woke with stomach pain. Couldn't eat the porridge Bessie brought. Hands shook so much the spoon fell 3 times. It'll pass quickly, Bessie lied, stroking her face. Close your eyes and think of good things. But what good things existed there? What happy memories could protect her from what was coming? At 2 p.m., guests arrived. 12 local elite white men, all complicit. Firm handshakes, expensive cigars, imported whiskey, carefully avoiding the elephant in the room. They were about to witness a 42-year-old man marry a 12-year-old child. They talked cotton prices, politics, fear of slave revolts, anything to pretend normal. Here you see why I said it's not just a villain story. Respectable people sat, drank, talked, and chose not to see. At 3 o'clock sharp, Reverend Thompson stood in the main room, Bible in hand, wooden cross around his neck. Guests sat in rows. Edward stood at front, satisfied smile, hands clasped behind. Then Sarah was brought in, escorted by 2 domestic slaves, so small in that loose white dress, so visibly terrified even the hardest men looked away. Bare feet barely sounded on wood. Eyes glazed, mind disconnecting as Mary taught. They placed her beside Edward, who looked at her like admiring a new purchase, not a person, an acquisition. The Reverend began, "Beloved brothers and sisters, we are gathered here." Empty words, prostituted liturgy, blasphemy, and solemn voice. Sarah didn't listen. She was far away, thinking of her mother, the father she barely remembered, fields under full moon. Anywhere but there. "Edward Harrington, do you take Sarah as your wife?" The question was obscene. Edward answered firmly, "I do." They didn't ask Sarah. Property has no voice. The Reverend hurried on, wanting to finish fast. "By the power vested in me." Lies, someone in quarters thought. Power of the devil, not God. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." There are moments the story holds its breath, realizing if no one interrupts, the world continues as if nothing absurd happened. Heavy silence. Edward leaned toward Sarah. She recoiled. He gripped her chin tightly. And at that exact moment, the world exploded. Boom. Gunfire thundered. Then another. Shouts. Wood splintering. Guests jumped, spilling wine. Edward dropped Sarah and ran to the window. What he saw drained his color. Dozens of horsemen stormed the property, torches lit, weapons drawn, determined faces. "Attack! We're under attack!" a foreman shouted before a bullet struck him. Foremen rushed to posts, but only 12 against 120. Fences torn in seconds. Armed men spread with military precision. Some ran to quarters, breaking locks, freeing people. Others surrounded the house. Chains breaking mixed with freedom cries. Courage changes everything. The untouchable place became fragile in seconds. Power without agreement collapses fast. Edward's guests fled the back door like rats, trampling each other to save themselves. Reverend Thompson dropped his Bible and ran with them. Cassock billowing, cross swinging, theology exposed as fraud and danger. Only Edward remained paralyzed, watching his empire crumble. In confusion, Sarah fell, curled up protecting her head. Bessie pulled her behind a sofa. "Stay here. Don't move." The house shook with heavy footsteps, furniture crashing, glass shattering. Then a voice cut through chaos. "Where is she? Where is my daughter?" Sarah lifted her head, heart stopping. She knew that voice. Impossible, but known from long ago, before the sale, when she still had a father. The door kicked open. Armed men entered. Before them, torchlit, stood a black man about 35, branding scars on chest, eyes burning with fury and love together. Isaiah Carter had returned from the impossible. He came for his daughter. Isaiah stopped in the doorway, chest heaving, smoking rifle in hand. Time froze. His eyes scanned until finding her, a small girl in white, huddled behind sofa, eyes wide with terror and impossible recognition. Sarah, his voice broke, saying the name. Sarah, my daughter. She blinked, trembling. That scarred, aged face, but those eyes. She knew them. Father. The word came as plea, prayer, question she dared not believe. Isaiah dropped his rifle, fell to knees, arms outstretched. Sarah staggered up and ran. Ran like never in fields, legs weak, heart pounding, straight into arms of the man who'd left her for dead 7 years before. He caught her, lifted her, pressed her to his chest. They wept with intensity that tore the world apart. Years of separation, pain, prayers, all ending in that impossible embrace. This scene needs no exaggeration. Simple truth. A father's love crosses time, distance, becomes strength. You're alive? Isaiah sobbed, kissing her head, cheeks, forehead. You've grown. So big. My girl, my baby. I came to get you. Sorry it took so long. I thought they said you were dead, Sarah cried, clinging like a shipwrecked person to a plank, fingers digging into shoulders, afraid if she let go he'd vanish. Never, daughter. Never stopped looking. Never. Other men spread through the house, searching rooms, overpowering, resisting overseers. Outside, quarters opened one by one. Enslaved people staggered toward freedom, disbelief in eyes. Some ran, some fell crying, some stood motionless processing broken chains. But one man remained free. Edward slipped down back stairs to his office for a pistol. World crumbling, property invaded, authority gone, perversion interrupted, but he wouldn't accept defeat without fight. He found the gun, loaded with trembling hands. 2 men burst in. Stay away. Edward pointed, hands shaking too much to aim. I am Edward Harrington. You know who I am. I own 500 people. Government friends. They'll hang you all for trespassing. Property. Isaiah's voice from doorway. He entered carrying Sarah, her face buried in his neck. Gently placed her in another's hands. Take her outside. Not for the child to see. Then turned to Edward. Eyes judgment and sentence. You talk property. Talk rights. But her rights? Pointed where Sarah was taken. She's 12, you monster. 12. And you were going to. Couldn't finish, rage choking him. I have legal rights. Law on my side. Registered property. And here I want you to stop with me. When law justifies inhumanity, law becomes mask. Mask doesn't make wrong right. Shut your mouth, Isaiah's shout echoed. No law here today, only truth. And truth is you're a demon in men's clothes. Edward tried shooting, hands shook. Bullet hit ceiling. Before reloading, 2 men disarmed him, slammed him against wall. He fell, tried rising, pushed again. Arrogance melted, coward beneath revealed. Please, money, gold. I can pay. Take what you want. Everything. Just let me live. Dignity gone, replaced by please. Take everything. Just let me live. Isaiah picked up a chain from floor, one Edward used on slaves, swung slowly. Metal clashed ominously. Know how many times I was chained? How many times beaten with that? Isaiah circled slowly. Edward cowered. 7 years. Sold. Bought. Branded like cattle. 7 years dreaming of returning for my daughter. And when I find where she is, I learn what you planned. I did nothing. Edward pleaded, tears streaming. By luck we arrived in time. But you were going to destroy a child because money gave you right. White skin armor against consequences. Outside, plantation transformed. Whipping post burned. Property documents ashes. Chains heaped and crackling in fire. Freed people hugged, cried, laughed. Not knowing where to go, but knowing they wouldn't stay. In office, Edward faced what he never had. Justice without law, truth without protection, consequence without escape. Men dragged him to Central Courtyard where dozens he tortured gathered. Forced him to kneel where he punished others. Mary Washington stepped forward. Old woman who cared for Sarah, survived 60 years horror. Looked in eyes, spat in face. For my daughter you sold far away. Another stepped up. For my brother you whipped to death. Another. For my father who died on the trunk. One by one they spoke truths. No theatrics, no spectacle, only testimony. Edward, always protected, heard empire's true cost for first time. This is justice rarely in stories. Not spectacle. Truth spoken aloud. For protected people, hearing truth is first punishment. What happened next? History doesn't detail. Some say Isaiah delivered justice himself. Others say he let Edward live, scarred forever, expelled from protecting society. What's certain, next sunrise, Edward ruled nothing. Hundreds walked free down road from cursed place. Dawn found Harrington Plantation silent as cemetery. Main house windows broken, doors torn off, furniture overturned. Wind blew through empty rooms carrying ashes of burned documents. Property deeds worthless, human sale contracts smoke, atrocity records stopped. Old quarters empty, chains open on floor, locks broken. Narrow plank beds where generations slept in anguish, now empty. Only wind moved through spaces, ghostly whisper of what happened and what would never happen again. In courtyard, Sarah sat on stone wrapped in heavy blanket. Hands held warm bread, first fresh in years, perhaps life. Beside her, pewter mug warm milk with honey, free people's food, given with love, not thrown like animal feed. Isaiah knelt before her, watching every movement like memorizing. How she chewed slowly, gripped blanket, eyes still holding shadows he wished erased. Gently touched her hair, someone combed it carefully, freed curls. Sarah, softly, we leave today forever. Never coming back. She looked wide-eyed, processing. Where we going? North. People there help folks like us. Safe houses. Communities. Find place to start over. This time, no one takes you from me. Never again. And Mary, Bessie, everyone? Isaiah smiled, squeezed hand. Anyone who wants comes. We travel together. Protect each other. As sun rose, sky gold and pink, group organized. 120 armed rescuers now protected nearly 300 freed people. Men, women, children, elderly. Some shoed, some barefoot, some makeshift bundles, others only clothes on backs. But all shared one thing, free. Mary walked to Sarah, held out small rag doll she made years ago. Some nights she woke screaming. Reliving room, white dress, Edward's hands. Isaiah held, rocked gently. Over. You safe. I'm here. Little by little, nightmare monster shrank. 7 weeks later, arrived Ohio Free Community. Simple, dignified houses, gardens, playing children, laughing people, black folks living without fear, chains, masters. Isaiah and Sarah entered village greeted with hugs, hot food, clean blankets. Welcome home, kind-faced elderly woman said. Save this for you. Thought you might want it. Sarah hugged doll the chest, silent tears. Thank you, Mary, everything. Old woman stroked face. You'll live, girl. Grow. Be happy. I prophesy it. Before leaving, Isaiah left final message. In Edward's ruined office, hung handwritten plaque, freedom arrived here. May no soul ever be chained on this earth again. And signed. No need. Message clear. March began noon. Nearly 400 climbed dirt road through cotton fields. Armed men perimeter, no pursuit. Remaining whites too busy fleeing/hiding to react. Sarah walked beside father, hand in his, glancing back, big house shrinking. Bessie other side, humming grandmother's song softly. Mary behind, walking stick but firm step. They were human river flowing to freedom. Travel took weeks. Crossed Mississippi night, aided by abolitionists on secret routes. Passed abandoned farms for camps. Shared food, sang around fires, told stories. Sarah listened wide-eyed. Africa tales Mary knew, escape stories men lived, hope all carried. Sarah looked around. Real houses, not quarters. Real food, not scraps. Real people, not property. First time in memory, something inside calmed. Years followed, Sarah grew. Learned reading with abolitionist missionaries. Helped community garden. Made friends. Played like any child. Scars remained, some things never go. But she learned living with them, not letting define her. At 18, became teacher, teaching freed children read/write. At 23, married good man, treating her with respect. 3 children, raised free, never knew chains. Isaiah lived to 60, saw grandchildren play in garden of house he built himself. On deathbed, Sarah held hand. Thank you coming for me. Thank you not giving up. He smiled, eyes shining. Made promise day they took you. I come back. Promises matter, Sarah, especially to loved ones. Decades later, old Sarah told story to great-grandchildren around fireplace. There was time bad people thought they could do anything. But day came good men said enough. Freedom came late for many, too late for some. But came. And when came, changed everything. Every listening child grew knowing. Justice, however long, reaches darkest places. Father's love spans years and miles. No chain binds human spirit forever. Harrington Plantation rotted, collapsed, swallowed by vegetation, ruins. Sarah Carter lived to 87, surrounded by family, respected, free to last breath. Freedom came late, but it came. If this story hurt you deeply, it's because it shows something still existing today. Evil doesn't depend only on those committing it. It depends on those staying silent. And perhaps hardest question, if you were there, would you be part of silence or interruption?